must say that the theme of this conference is set against a backdrop of higher education all over the world undergoing the most extreme form of change in its entire history. Now, we know the drivers of this change: globalization, intense competition across international borders, intense competition from private providers, demography, lots of others, but perhaps the most disruptive of all, technology. And technology, of course, includes the internet and all that that has made possible, new forms of scholarship and learning and research, new requirements of our students, more choices and more demands for potential staff. And in the change of all this, universities face their rising costs and their governments and their students' inability to fund those costs. Have universities changed to reflect all these dramatic trends in society? With a few notable exceptions, I would say not. And I'll include the Open University of Catalonia in the exceptions, I hasten to say. And no surprise that it's this university that's posing the questions here today. Most universities do not look or act vastly different to how they acted 50 or even more years ago. And indeed, most of them are not particularly innovative. So I would say that basically their present business model is unsustainable, even broken. Now here's the good news. At a time of great change, there are always opportunities. There are exciting opportunities waiting to be grasped, and one significant opportunity for a university has to be changing the way it attracts, develops, and keeps talent. And that's the subject on which I've been invited to speak. So, talent, what does it mean? Of course, talent has always been important. But in the last 2 decades or so, we've come to know that 2 young men in a garage can outperform a major corporation. That an individual in a Harvard dormitory can devise a billion-dollar idea. That a bunch of crazy musicians can defy the colossus of the music industry and win. And that lots and lots of talented people don't need an institution to make them great. They can do it all by themselves. We also know that there's a significant percentage of individuals in our so-called knowledge society that are what Richard Florida calls creative professionals. And it's not just universities chasing them. Virtually any large institution in the public or the private sector are chasing them as well. Quite apart from headhunting, this recognition of the importance of talent has provoked a great deal of research. And I'm going to briefly mention just 4 of them. Firstly, there's the research that demonstrates that it's not true that talent is something that you are born with. Daniel Coyne describes what he calls the talent code. And that's a combination of things. There's the things that ignite talent, and there are many and various. There's the importance of what he calls master coaching. And then there's the necessity of deep practice. If you've read the book Outliers, you will have read of Malcolm Gladwell describing the necessity of about 10,000 hours of practice before someone becomes truly great at anything. This research tells us a lot about what we need to stimulate and develop talent among our staff and our student body. And it also tells our students what they have to do if they're going to achieve their best. Secondly, there's a lot of research on what motivates creative, talented people to high performance. Daniel Pink, for example, thinks there are 3 elements to motivation: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy has to do with self-directions. Creative people are very self-directed. Mastery, and mastery is actually a mindset. It's a mindset that says there is pain to be endured, that there is something that's never going to be fully achieved. If you take great golfers like Tiger Woods, for example, they are never satisfied with their performance. They continually strive to be better. Many great artists produced some of their best work late in life, and they too are still never satisfied. They constantly seek mastery. And the third thing is purpose, where we're doing something which matters, doing it well and doing it in the service of a cause greater than ourselves. So understanding those drivers will assist in the attraction and development of talent in any institution. Thirdly, there is research on what makes people more creative and how to put together the ingredients for a creative environment. And fourthly, finally, there is research on how they could be managed and perhaps more importantly, led. Now, I'm not going to attempt to summarize all the research. What I'm going to do is concentrate initially on the last two types I've mentioned and describe what I think leaders and institutions can do to attract, keep, and manage talent, however it's defined. But in order to do the subject justice, I think we need to understand something about truly talented, creative people. And I'm just going to give you 10, give you hope that there are only 10 in case you think I'm going on too long. 10 attributes of creative people. Number one, they are driven. It's no coincidence that Daniel Pink called his book Drive. John Lennon, in a 1964 interview, makes this comment, and I quote, "We'll carry on writing music forever, whatever else we're doing, because you can't just stop. You'll find yourself doing it whether you want to or not." Close quote. And those of us who have worked with truly talented people recognize that characteristic instantly. Driven. They don't really need to be managed. They'll get it. Secondly, they crave novelty. There's a compulsive condition to a creative spirit. They want to be in places that feed their curiosity, delight their senses, and reciprocate their compulsion. And diversity is important to the novelty they seek. Gordon Torr tells us that in every single case, and I quote, "In every single case and in every single city that has demonstrated any degree of cultural or scientific achievement, the presence of a sizable population of economic migrants is a necessary condition for success." I found that a fascinating quote. It seems clear that the intersection of skills and perspectives and different worldviews is a precondition for novelty. So too, as Florida points out, is tolerance and self-expression. And I must tell you that the repression that existed in apartheid South Africa, where I grew up and lived most of my life, resulted in a tangible, near absence of creativity. 3, they seldom achieve their best in isolation or in small collectives. That's not to say that creativity can't be, to quote, peaceful work performed in solitude, but a significant number of creative people need to be with other creative people, with other talented people, where ideas and dreams and visions and different worldviews can be shared and then spark new paths, new things to research, new inventions. People advise that we should try to create a galaxy rather than simply get hold of a star. Hire a star professor, and aspiring PhDs in that subject will flock to work with that person. But that star also wants to be with other catalysts to creativity, wants to be connected with other stars, other thought leaders, because they understand that a group of stars forms a galaxy, and galaxies shine brightly enough to light the way for others to follow. It's not really a good idea to recruit one star. He or she will not stay the course, will become frustrated and bored by having no one else to test ideas, take ideas further, and provide different points of view. And given the wonders of today's world, galaxies can be created by collaborative working across the world, and certainly by collaborative working with other stars in business and in other creative industries. There must be marvelous possibilities in a city like Barcelona, which already has a reputation for creativity and innovation. Collaborative working also acts as a marketing pull, what marketeers call pull, towards your organization, because many more stars will get to know you that way. That's 3. 4, they don't like being managed. And I must tell you, academics really don't like being managed. They don't like being told what to do. They need to be persuaded. They need to be given time and opportunity to ask questions and interrogate any institutional strategy or change project. They need to be heard, and they'll find their own way. And I can't emphasize strongly enough how important it is to engage these kind of people in the grand project necessary to drive transformation in higher education. A transformation that I think is essential to its survival. 5, deriving, if you like, from the last one, they loathe bureaucracy. All the tedium of regulations and processes and committees and procedures that are drowning universities in the Western world. Their inherent subversiveness abhors the business of management. Management's a dirty word in academia circles. And we often find that it drives them to the edges and even out of institutions. A lot of them work at the edges or the margins. They want to pursue uncharted paths in their quests to achieve new levels of performance. And often, institutional environments have so many policies and procedures that they constrain rather than facilitate. So getting them, these people, to move from the margins, where most of them operate at the moment, to the core is vital in this new world, in my view. 6, they need space. They need creative space. And they need resources. And they need support, often emotional support, strangely enough, when projects and dreams take longer to bring to fruition than is expected. And sometimes they need support to call closure. And support is often required in unexpected ways. My experience, and I can only go on a whole lifetime in academia, my experience is that academics can be very unkind to one another. Creative spaces are also spaces which are one of the attributes conducive to blossoming and growth. Now, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, of course, but there's an interesting book I recommend to you called Jamming by a chap called John Carr. And he shows that creativity, just like the musical discipline of jazz, has a vocabulary and a grammar. It's a process, and because it's a process, it can be observed and analyzed and understood and replicated and taught and even managed. Like musicians in a jam session, a group of people can take an idea, challenge one's other's imagination, and produce an entirely new set of possibilities. And Carr reveals in this book how managers can stimulate creativity in their employees, explores the impact of information technology on creativity, looks at the globalization of creativity, and shows how to ensure the loyalty of people who design, build, and deliver today's vital products and services. And this issue of loyalty is non-trivial. It brings me to my 7th attribute. Their loyalties are divided. Most academic staff, for example, do have divided loyalties. We know that. They're likely to have greater loyalty to their discipline than they are to the institution in which they work. The opinion of their peers in their discipline is much more important to them than the opinion of those that manage or govern the university. And this makes it really, really important to make your institution the one where they believe they will be supported to achieve their very creative best and satisfy the importance they attach to peer group recognition. 8, they want flexibility and mobility. We have to understand that truly talented people have lots of choices. Within reasonable limits, of course, always reasonable limits, don't force them to give up all their choices. It might well work in your favor to have them working for you only some of the time. They'll bring you ideas from other places, other groups, inside or outside of the university sector. Keeping mobile is important to them, and it should be important to you that they're mobile. Nowadays, collaborative research groups coalesce around a particular problem and break up when that problem is resolved. Your people, your truly talented people, need to be in those groups. 9th attribute. They won't all look the same as your present cohort of staff. There's a saying that you can't fix a problem using the tools that created it. And there's an echo of that in staffing. When we look at the university sector in Europe, we see that it's mainly male-dominated, despite present company, quite elderly, and quite white. It will, and it does, replicate itself if it's left to its own devices. We know that diversity is important, and we need to be energetic and innovative in promoting it in our institutions if we're going to attract the brightest and the best from wherever they may be. And finally, number 10, importantly, we need to understand that creative people are not all the same. They are likely themselves to be a very diverse set of people, indeed quite a complicated set of people. So let's assume at this stage that we have some idea of the attributes of clever, creative people, and by examining the attributes that I've described, we do have some strong pointers as to how leaders should manage and lead. We've also gathered some understanding, I hope, of what motivates them, and that too gives strong pointers as to how institutions should structure its processes and its rewards. But what can leaders do? The leaders of universities are not quite the same as the leaders of other kinds of creative organizations. The hierarchies are different. The social contract, for want of a better word, is not the same. In many countries, academics have tenure, and any leader who wishes to break that contract of tenure will have extreme difficulty in doing so. So how do you lead people who don't want to be managed, don't want to be led, and with whom you have, in fact, very few points of leverage? People like me, and of course Emma, have had to ponder that question and arrive at some practical strategies, some of which I've already alluded to, as well as some sort of cast of mind, a philosophy, if you like. Now, of course, there are as many leadership styles as there are leaders, so I can only go on my own experience of several decades. First of all, I've always described and seen myself as what has been called a servant leader, in the service of the creative people who are going to make the university great. I saw my role as one of inspiring them, in them a sense of mission, and then harnessing their talent in transforming the institution, aligning resources to achieve our mission, the institution's mission, as well as their own goals. And that included developing their talent. And then keeping from them as much of the hassle and drudgery of regulatory regimes and bureaucracy as I possibly could. I was part of their support system, even their patron, if you like. I respected their talents, and I really cared about them as people. I was tolerant of mistakes, important, and I tried to encourage a culture of risk management rather than risk aversion. Risk aversion is something we see a lot of in universities. I tried hard to promote diversity, and I tried extremely hard to find connections and make partnerships and collaborations across the organization, across the city, across the country, across other businesses and other universities. And I held very fast to certain values which I made very clear. And I held fast to the mission of the university. I acted as a radar screen, if you like, for what was going on outside the university, which would affect its ability to deliver on its mission. I also gave, against great odds, I also gave attention to brand and brand building. Academics are scornful, contemptuous of concepts like brand attaching themselves to the academic endeavor, the scholastic endeavor. But in this global consumerist-driven society, where rankings assume, often unwarranted, assume importance, branding is one of the means by which collaborative partnerships will be promoted and talent attracted to the institution. So I don't think it can be ignored. Does it matter to the institution, to all these creative people, what the leader does? After all, we now know that leadership is a shared activity. It needs to be encouraged at all levels of an organization. The rectora can't look after everybody herself, despite desperately trying. Having said that, I have seen institutions lose some of their best talent because of failures of leadership. Failures of leadership in grasping the essence of how talented people work and also what motivates them. And the flight of talent destroys an organization quicker than you can possibly imagine. And there are many examples in business and in universities. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, let me say that creativity has always been at the heart of good research and therefore at the heart of what drives the academic endeavor. But at a time of seismic change, when the business model of the university needs to be reinvented, creativity assumes even more importance. All the talent, all the partnerships and collaborations that can be mustered to that task need to be harnessed. Talent is indeed the engine of growth, as the theme of this conference suggests, not just in our places of learning, but in our whole economy. If we are to rise to the challenge of present economic woes, those who understand how to manage creativity in their people, organize for creative results, and willingly implement good new ideas will triumph. Let us hope that this university in this wonderful city will be amongst the most triumphant. Thank you for your attention.